The frost crept across the observation window like crystalline fingers. Each breath Mara Kellen exhaled, adding another layer of fog to the glass. 3 days since the shuttle crash. 3 days since her distress beacon had gone silent. Its power cell shattered against the jagged rocks of this frozen hell they called Terminus 9. She knelt beside the makeshift fire pit, arranging fragments of the shuttle's composite panels in a careful pyramid. The material wasn't designed to burn, but desperation had taught her that with enough heat from the emergency flares, even the impossible became fuel. Her fingers, wrapped in torn pieces of her flight suit, worked methodically despite the cold. That had long since stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like inevitability. That's when she felt it, a tentative tug at her sleeve. Mara's hand shot to the plasma cutter at her hip, her engineer's mind cataloging threats in microseconds. But when she turned, weapon half drawn, she found herself staring into eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian in the dim light of her headlamp. The creature stood barely half a meter tall, its body covered in scales that shifted from deep violet to midnight blue depending on how the light caught them. 4 legs supported a serpentine body, while 2 smaller appendages, arms she supposed, reached toward her. 1 small paw still clutched her sleeve. The species classification flashed through her mind from the pre-mission briefings. Apex predator. Juvenile form. Toxic bite. Packhunter. Cub Row, as she would later name it, tilted its head with an almost bird-like curiosity. Shoo, Mara whispered, pulling her arm back sharply. Go find your mother. The cub stumbled backward, landing on its hindquarters with an almost comical expression of surprise. It made a sound, something between a chirp and a growl, then simply sat there watching her with those impossibly dark eyes. Mara returned to her fire. Survival first, xenobiology later. The flare ignited with a hiss and she carefully positioned it beneath the composite panels. Smoke began to rise, acrid and chemical, but beneath it she could feel the whisper of warmth beginning to spread. Another tug at her sleeve. She spun around, and there it was again. Cub Row had crept closer, silent as shadow, and now sat directly beside her. This close, she could see the delicate patterns etched into its scales, could hear the soft wheezing of its breath. The cub was shivering. You're cold too, Mara said softly, more to herself than to the creature. Intelligence flickered in those obsidian eyes. The cub pulled at her sleeve again, gentler this time, then looked toward the growing fire. Mara's training screamed warnings at her. Apex predator, probably separated from its pack. Probably desperate. Desperate animals were dangerous animals, but 3 days alone on a frozen planet had taught her something the Academy never could. Loneliness was its own kind of predator, and it killed just as surely as any alien fauna. She pulled her arm back once, firm but not violent. Stay on your side, she said, gesturing to a spot near the fire but away from her. You get warm, I get warm. No touching. Cub Row watched her hand movements with an intensity that suggested comprehension beyond mere animal instinct. Slowly, deliberately, it moved to the spot she had indicated and curled into a tight ball, its tail wrapping around its body. The fire grew, and with it, the small pocket of warmth that separated them from the killing cold outside. Mara pulled out the last of her ration bars. 2 days passed when they should have run out, but she'd been rationing them into quarters, and broke off a piece. She ate slowly, making the food last, and tried not to think about the rescue that should have come by now. A soft whimpering sound made her look up. Cub Row was watching her eat, and the longing in its expression was so visceral, so heartbreakingly human in its desperation, that Mara felt something crack in her chest. You're hungry too, she whispered. The cub's tail twitched. Its scales had stopped shifting colors and had settled into a dull grayish blue. That couldn't be good. Mara looked at the remaining rations in her hand. 3/4 pieces, maybe 36 hours of survival if she rationed them perfectly. Or maybe, just maybe, 1 night of shared warmth with a creature that was just as lost and scared as she was. She tossed a 1/4 piece toward the cub. Cub Row snapped it from the air with reflexes that reminded Mara exactly what kind of predator she was sharing her fire with. But instead of lunging for more, instead of attacking while she was vulnerable, the creature simply ate, then settled back into its curled position and continued to watch her with those knowing eyes. The night deepened. The temperature dropped further. Mara fed the fire with careful precision, making each piece of composite material count. She ran calculations in her head: heat loss rates, caloric burn, probability of rescue. The numbers weren't encouraging. She must have dozed off because when she jerked awake, the fire had burned low, and the cold had crept close enough to steal the feeling from her toes. Mara reached for more fuel with numb fingers, and that's when she realized the warmth against her side wasn't just the dying fire. Cub Row had moved. Not to attack, not to steal. The small predator had simply pressed itself against her, sharing what warmth its body could generate. In sleep it looked even smaller, almost fragile, its scales rising and falling with each breath. Mara's hand hovered over the plasma cutter, then slowly moved to rest on the cub's scaled back instead. It was warm, solid, alive. "Okay," she whispered into the darkness. "Okay, little one. We'll survive this together." Cub Row stirred at her voice, opened one obsidian eye, then settled deeper against her side. A soft purring sound emanated from its chest. And despite everything, the crash, the cold, the certainty that rescue might never come, Mara found herself smiling. Humans. She'd learned at the academy, were pack animals too. They just sometimes found their pack in the strangest places. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Terminus 9. But inside the shelter, curled beside a fire built from desperation and determination, an engineer and a predator cub shared warmth, and in that sharing, found something more precious than survival. They found they weren't alone.